This is our Facebook Fridays. And I'm going to be doing these every Friday. And I'll be answering questions that you have. So please join the group and submit questions. And I might pick one of your questions and talk about it. So we'll put the link in the comments. So today's topic, I want to talk about a dilemma that one of our Facebook moms posted in the group. And I got her permission. She told me I could talk about this. And so I kind of want to talk to her, and I don't want to say her name because I want her to have privacy, but I'm going to call her Kay. And so I kind of want to talk to you, Kay, about this. The dilemma is that she's got an ex spouse who is sabotaging her and her relationship with her kids. And I want to read you what Kay shared with me. So I'll sort of condense it a little bit, but here's what Kay said. She said, "My biggest struggle with my kids is when they come back from their dads. They seem very disconnected from me. We all sat down last night and engaged in conversation, and we talked about the things they enjoy, and I just listened to them without giving advice, like you explained in your video. So a lot of my YouTube videos and my parenting course on my website, I talk a lot about advice, and I'm going to say more about that today." And then Kay said, "Then my kids started opening up about what their dad's teaching them, and he's teaching them conspiracy theories. He's telling them that if they ever, I think if they pursue their dreams, become famous, pursue music, that they'll have to join a cult, secret society." He's just talking, frankly, a lot of crazy stuff. And she says, and I didn't want to give advice, but all I could keep thinking in my head is that their dad's a nut job. And then she said this, "But I would never bash him because he is an extension of them." And then Kay goes on and says that her ex started bashing her and telling them bad things about her and mistakes that she's made. And Kay said, "This really hurts me." And she said, "My automatic thought, which would be normal for most of us, is to defend myself, to tell them everything he's done to me and how abusive he's been. But I know that wouldn't help. And so and so she's in this dilemma. The dilemma is this: now I feel like I have to love them and be viewed as the bad guy. I have to bite my tongue about all of it. And I also have to try to undo the damage that he's done with these conspiracy theories." And so, right, I mean, what a dilemma this is for her. And she ends by saying, "I'm just heartbroken and lost." And so that's why I want to talk to you today, Kay, because I want to try and help you be less lost and less heartbroken. But this is such a hard situation. There, in some ways, there's just no really great way of dealing with this because you are going to continue to deal with hurt feelings, and your kids are going to be affected, and you cannot control him. I do want to say huge kudos to you. Um, you are already, as you will tell from some of the things I'm going to talk about today, you are already doing so many things right. Um, I'm just kind of blown away at your maturity and admiring you that you want to do the right things. You actually said something in that message you sent me that I think is genius. You said I would never bash him because he is an extension of them, my kids. And that's an amazing and very accurate way of looking at this. Their dad is an extension of them. And if you bash him, then you hurt them, and you do not want to hurt your kids. We always, the sort of the guiding principle in dealing with this is that we always want to do what's best for the kids. Um, so there's a couple of problems with this situation that you're in. Number one, your ex is saying bad things about you. And number two, he's filling them with a bunch of nonsense. He's actually trying to control how they think. And he's not just lying about you, but he's probably lies about lots of things. And so I want to give you some tips about how to deal with this issue. And this can sort of apply to lots of relationships. So I'm talking to Kay about her ex, and these are specific to this situation, but I think there are lots of situations in relationships that we have with people where we're being sabotaged or things are happening to us that feel like they're out of our control. And so I think you can You can kind of use these principles in lots of situations. Okay, so I got 7 ideas for you, Kate. Number 1, um, and this is really hard, don't take this personally. So when your kids tell you stuff that he says about you, I want you to remember this is a reflection of him. He's being a baby. He's throwing a temper tantrum as a child. This is really a reflection of him. It has nothing to do with you. And so, in essence, to not take things personally, sometimes we kind of have to detach emotionally. And so, you need to kind of think about practicing that. Um, Detaching emotionally in healthy ways is a skill. You actually have to learn this as a therapist. You have to learn how to be empathetic, but not take things home with you every night after you've heard stories, awful stories that people tell you. And so it's actually can be healthy for you to detach emotionally. Remember that you don't want to hitch your self-esteem to what other people think of you, right? We don't want to, our self-esteem should not be dependent upon what other people's approval or disapproval of us. So number 1, don't take things personally and detach. Number 2, um, you're already doing this, but do not retaliate and do not be defensive, right? It's very tempting in these situations to sort of retaliate and say things back or to get back at your ex. Don't do that because you need to remain calm for the sake of your kids. So don't be defensive. Avoid things like saying, I don't do that or that's not how I am, right? What I want you to do is see these moments. These are opportunities for you to have conversations with your kids about what they heard and more importantly, about what it means to them, right? So sometimes not being defensive is really hard for us. And I think one of the antidotes to defensiveness is empathy. And so instead of being defensive, have empathy for your kids as you're trying to understand what it means to them. Okay, number 3, you also acknowledge with empathy what your ex said to them. So just acknowledge with them and focus on the impact it's having on them. So you might ask empathetic questions like, or statements, right? I'm sorry that dad said that to you, or that must be really hard for you to hear that from dad. Or you could say, what you heard must make you feel really, scared or angry or sad or whatever it is, right? So you're trying to create a situation with them where they get that you're safe and that they will open up and talk with you because that's really the most important thing in navigating these tricky sort of divorce situations when you're getting slammed. Now, while you're doing all of this, try to be calm and be even keeled. And I know that sounds simple to do. It's sometimes very almost impossible to do, but here's why it's important to be calm. Number 1, it creates safety for your kids, right? If you are calm, then your kids will feel safe to talk to you. It sort of just gives you lots of opportunities for them to open up to you. Number 2, it makes you credible. It gives you credibility. If you're, if we're freaking out all the time when we get upset, then we are not credible. People will actually believe the things that other people told them about us, right? So you just want to be as calm as you can. Sometimes that's really hard, right? Sometimes you have to take a good long deep breath before you respond. I actually even think it's okay if you hear something that really upsets you from one of your kids, to say, hey, I need to kind of think about this for a little bit. It's okay to step away as long as you have to come back to it. Again, remember your ex is throwing a tantrum. That's kind of the way I want you to think about it. This is a reflection of him and his immaturity and not you. And what your kids need from you is to be the grown up. They need you to have that safe space for them. We know from research that kids do better in divorce situations. Kids do great when both parents work together and are supportive of each other and can kind of come together. You might not have that opportunity, right? Sounds like you won't. But we also know from research that kids can still do well when at least one of the homes is emotionally safe. And you're already doing this, but that's something to kind of keep in mind. Okay, now, number 5, I want you to know that you can confront distortions with facts. When you don't say anything, that's not going to make the problem go away. And so I don't encourage you just to listen. I admire what you say about trying not to give advice, but I want to clarify for you because I think you're confusing listening advice and confronting distortions with facts. So, probably what you're referring to in a lot of my videos on YouTube, I talk about how to connect with kids. And in my parenting course on my website, I had basically the most of the course is dedicated to how to do that, how to connect with your kids and how to have influence with your kids. But generally speaking, I think I think that listening is a way that we connect with people, and advice is a way that we disconnect from people. And so, in probably a couple of my YouTube videos, I won't go into the story here, but I do share a story about my daughter once who was really hurt by a boy. And my reaction was I wanted to kill this kid because he hurt my daughter. Not really, of course, but I wanted to protect her. And she was so hurt by this boy. And I remember she wanted to talk to me about it. So we kind of went off and we sat together and we talked about it. And she was telling me all these things that he was doing or that had hurt her. And she's crying. And of course, I feel like I want to correct her and I want to tell her to blow him off and she's better than him and blah, 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 all these things. Right. And it was hard. I had to make myself shut up. I had to not advice. I had to not give advice. I had to not interject. And what was powerful about that story for me is that when we were done talking, and I really did 99% listening and 1% talking, she thanked me for it. She felt better for it. And she really thanked me for listening to her. And in its essence, I think I sort of suffered with her. I think that's one of the things that we can do as parents. Sometimes you can't fix a problem. And so sometimes we have to just sort of suffer with our kids. Now, that's a way to connect with kids. But that does not mean, Kay, that you just have to sit there and take it, right? It doesn't mean that your kids get to come home believing all this crazy stuff and you just don't say anything about it. So you do get to confront distortions with facts. It's tricky. You have to lead with listening. You have to lead with acknowledging what they've heard. And you lead with empathy. You ask questions about how did this make you feel? Again, like, did this make you feel sad? Or but that made you feel really scared? Like a lot of times I'll hear parents say, your mom took all the money and therefore I don't have any money to buy you an Xbox or whatever. Right. And so that might make the kids feel scared, like we don't have any money. And so you have to sort of ask them these empathetic questions and you do listen to them. But once you've done that, it's okay for you to provide facts. Like, um, remember what he's doing to you is an attempt to blame you and sort of split the kids against you, right? So when you prevent facts, you're not really doing the same thing. You're not being defensive, right? You're just asking them questions and you are absolutely answering those questions honestly, right? You are taking time to have an honest discussion with your kids, right? You can even challenge them a little bit. You can say, well, what do you think about that? Or do you really believe that about me, right? Okay, please feel free to explain to your kids that what they heard about you is not true. Again, you're not attempting to prove anything, right? You're just giving facts, right? So if dad says, we can't afford an Xbox because your mom took all the money, well, you can say something like, I'm really sorry that dad said that. That must be really scary to you. It's true. When we divorced, we both now have less money than we did before, but we still have enough money for everything that we need, right? So you can say things like that. Now, the next part of this is really important because as you confront with facts, you also have to give your kids permission to think for themselves. So remember again, your ex is not doing that. He's trying to control how they think. And what you want to do is do the opposite. You're going to give your kids agency, right? So when you talk to them directly, you're not pressuring them to believe your side of the story. There's no coercion involved. It's sort of like you're delivering facts in a very sort of matter of fact way. But you're also letting them know they have a right to their own feelings and their own opinions, and you're not going to try to influence that. Okay. I promise you, Kay, your kids will be forever grateful to you if you do this for them. If you teach them the ability to think for themselves. So many people in life nowadays cannot think for themselves. They're so influenced by what will somebody think of me and basically getting external approval from others. It's such a great life skill if you can think for yourself. Let me give you sort of I'm not really going to go into the story. I tell this story in my parenting course, but I kind of want to share the outcome of it. So I was in a situation with my dad when I was younger, was a kid, and there was a conflict of opinions between he and my teacher, and I was very, very influenced by this teacher. And what I remember most about this situation was how my dad responded to me about this. And I kind of went and talked with him and told him all of these things. And the reason this made it kind of tricky is because it really had to do with my dad's career, his livelihood. And it was very negative. And I would never have blamed him if he sort of got mad and, whatever. But my dad said this. He said, listen, I'm going to share, this is after I told him everything on my side. He said, I'm going to share with you my view, and it's very different. And then I'm going to let you make your own decision about this, about what you want to do. And I share this again now because what he did is he allowed me to think for myself. And I've always appreciated that about him. Why was I so influenced by him? He listened to me. He didn't judge me. He didn't badmouth my teacher. He let me choose for myself. And another reason I was so influenced by him is because of the relationship that we had. I was sort of naturally drawn to him because he was always a safe person. I could tell my dad anything. And Kay, that's kind of what you want with your kids. You want them to be able to tell you anything. So as hard as it is to hear some of this nonsense that you're hearing from them, think of it as an opportunity to connect with them, even though it's hard, right? So that's my last piece of advice. So what we've talked about so far is don't take it personally, don't retaliate, um, be empathetic, confront distortions with facts, allow your kids to think for themselves, encourage your kids to think for themselves. But lastly, maintain that relationship that you have with your kids. You already told me in a comment, you said, what'd you say? I said, I've tried to create memories, fun road trips, listening to them and telling them how they're free to be who they are and forming their own opinions. You're already doing so many things right, in my opinion. Maintain that relationship with them. One thing I'll add is that you had said, in one of your notes to me, I told my daughter that it's time for bed last night. And she argued that I had told her that we could stay up. And I told her we never had that discussion. And then she commented, there you go, gaslighting me. Well, that kind of makes me laugh. We know, okay, where that came from, right? We know that's from dad, right? In last week's live, I talked a bit about this idea that I call noise. And noise is just nonsense. It's just stuff kids say to keep us arguing, to wear us down. And noise is to be ignored. So, for example, if I say to my son, you have to be home by midnight, and then he wants to say, he wants to argue, but he really does it in the form of a question. Like, well, why do I have to be home by midnight? All my friends, he's not really asking me a question. He's not asking a genuine question. He doesn't want to know really why. He's he's arguing with me, right? So it's just noise. So if she says things to you like, there you go, gaslighting, I'd probably I'd probably pay no attention to that kind of stuff. All right. You could even say very calmly and very sort of bluntly in your nice way that you have, in this house, this is what we do. We go to bed at whatever. We go to bed at 10 or whatever it is, and just leave it at that. Don't get bothered. So, quick summary. Um, in my parenting course, I talk a lot about sort of how to handle things when you're going it alone as a parent. But for purposes of today, in the situation that you shared, Kay, and I think a lot of people are in your situation professionally. I've seen many, many, many moms and dads who are in this situation where they're being sort of blasted by their spouse and they just feel helpless and don't know what to do about it. To reiterate, don't take this personally. Don't retaliate. Don't be defensive. Acknowledge with empathy what your kids are hearing, and ask questions calmly so that you can understand, how this is affecting them. Feel free to confront distortions with facts, right? And you can clarify, but also give your kids permission to think for themselves. And then lastly, always just focus on that relationship. And so I will close this live with this sort of promise. I've seen this enough in my career for 25 years. I remember when I started private practice 25 years ago, I would see situations like this where these little kids were sort of in the middle, and mom or dad was blasting the other parent. And what I've noticed over the years is that if there was at least one parent like UK that was a safe parent, that sort of did these things, that maintained the relationship with the kids, that didn't retaliate, that made it safe to talk to them, these kids, I noticed over the years, they will return to you. Now, it's hard when you're in the moment because it feels like you're losing them. And it feels like you're going to lose your relationship with them. But if you're the safe parent, these kids will come back to you. And I'll just end our live today with that. And again, encourage all of you, if you've got questions, I would be happy to address them. And I'll see you next week.